sum up what we've talked about in terms of vocal development or voice change for both boys and girls. Just finishing up what we talked about for female voice change, I'm drawing your attention to, again, another chart that's important to remember. You've been through the phases before, so you recognize that top line. She provides for you an excellent singing range that will be helpful if you think of B3 as the B below middle C and F4 as the top line of the treble clef. You can build from there. Certainly, female singers can sing well above these notes, but for your general application, you should use this as your initial guide. And also, you see what the ages are there. I've provided for you, courtesy of Phillips from a book called Teaching Kids to Sing, some of these ranges as he understands them and as he appreciates them. And these are the female ranges that he provides for soprano and alto. I should also point out that, of course, boys can sing soprano and alto as well. And I would encourage you in your future practice, rather than saying guys and ladies or girls, to say sopranos, altos, tenors, basses, or for the upper voices, trebles, and for the lower bass clef singers. In order to really help them through the transition, it's very important that they have an understanding, an alert one, of their technique and their body map. We alluded to this in earlier classes. That means that the sensation of singing is clear in their mind before they go into the transition. Of course, sometimes you can't help that because you're teaching middle school and don't have any say in what's happening at the elementary school level. But in good programs, you will be able to have that dialogue. Making sure that the students have a sense of ownership of the new musical experiences. Whereas in elementary school, you can say, we're going to do this song. In middle school, letting them have a sense of what those selections are can be is very valuable and connects to the idea of relatedness. If they are singing through their change and they were singing prior to the change happened, it's going to be a smoother singing experience in general for them. The stages will still happen, but there may not necessarily be as much separation of registers. They're going to have more facility in handling mixed voice, and they're probably going to be quicker in adjusting their singing, the motor practices of their singing based on the physiological change. Those who are inexperienced, however, this is where you can start to hear some clumsiness. So, as I said, getting ready for their transition, it should be a clear and open discussion. They should have an accurate idea of their body map. What should the skeleton look like when they're singing? You can link it to other exciting physical changes, but as I mentioned before, that sometimes can backfire and be just plain old creepy. But sometimes it can come from their dialogue and their explanations, and if they bring it up, then it's cool. Also linking to role models that they know, making sure that, especially in middle school, if you can have a college person come and talk about their voice change, especially if they were singing through their change, that can be meaningful for them. A high school person is also good, but not as effective as a college student. The research shows that you skip a level if you really want to reach them. So in other words, for elementary school students, have a high schooler talk to them. For middle school, have a college person talk to them. For during their transition, constantly remind them of what the body should look like, especially in alignment and alignment, making sure that things are really lined up. And I'll show something about that later on. Keep reminding them that the voice is growing, that it's strengthening, that it's expanding. That's going to be an important thing for them to bear in mind as they're proceeding. Emphasize that singing is a skill, not a talent, and that they have all the tools they need to have an enjoyable singing experience. If those tools are a little bit shabby right now, in other words, the voice is going through a change and is not as manageable, make sure that they're ever mindful that it's going to improve. The culture of the class should be one of support and celebration of their voice change. Keeping track of their growth can also be a powerful way of making the voice change meaningful for them. And that's really the goal we're going for, is that it's meaningful for them. It's not just some weird thing that gets in the way, but that it's a moment in life that only happens once, and that they can enjoy and appreciate that and write their own story of what their growth was like. I'm a huge fan of regular interaction with older voices. Finding opportunities for the middle schoolers to sing with the high schoolers is a really valuable experience. Singing with adults is also especially powerful. And one of my favorite activities is having a family piece that everybody sings together. That can be a really valuable experience. One of the things that's very current right now is having separate rehearsals for sopranos, altos, tenor, basses, and by gender is very in. And my experience has been that that can be particularly effective because they are such different cultural groups, and that their behavior when they're mixed is different and sometimes obstructive. So consider that as you are seeing some of these different programs. Now, one of the most important things to bear in mind, especially with male voice change, is to make sure that the head remains aligned. You can see in the picture here that there is a center line on the skull, in the bottom skull, that shows where the spine attaches to the skull. If you think of the Earth and where the molten core of the Earth is in the center, that's where the meeting of the spine and the skull take place, is in that exact geographic center. Making sure that the vocal tract remains free and that they're singing an energized, supported sound. These will be the things that you'll want to really engage in their technique. There's a thing called phonational gap, that if they are doing multiple register singing, and this is especially noticeable in male voices, where they cannot phonate. They can't make a sound on particular pitches because the two registers have diverged. They do converge later on, but they start to separate. And sometimes the phonational gap will appear before we hear any significant change in the voice. So sometimes that's a bit of an alarm bell that the change is coming. This is especially true for top space E. For some reason, that's one of the first ones to go in the tenor and bass voices, in the male voices. So a lot of times alto lines for boys' voices who are changing, sometimes you might want to put them on alto, but unfortunately, if they have a phonational gap, that alto line is extremely not suitable for them to sing in. That's why it's called the alto problem. A quick reminder of something we talked about in class, that cognitive parallels age and that emotions parallel puberty, and that those emotions are expressed physically. They are much more they are more overt oftentimes, and somebody can make themselves sick from the overwhelming gushing of emotions that are happening. Our response to that is to encourage critical thinking and skill building. The repertoire talk is going to be in a separate video, and so I will bid you farewell to this particular unit.